I said the Antarctic Pavilion, the Fondaco Marcello. It's great to see you all here. We were going to have a sit-down talk, we were going to have presentations, but I think in the spirit of this pavilion and its focus on a kind of international dialogue, a kind of transnational collaboration and a conviviality, I thought it would be better if we did it in a more informal way and if we sort of conceived of it as a kind of a roving conversation. So my name is Nadim Samman, I'm the curator of the Antarctic Pavilion. Over here to my right, Alexey Kozyr, the commissioner of the pavilion. Sasha had the idea for an Antarctic pavilion many moons ago, and it was a conversation that developed in time, and here we find ourselves today. So while this is an independent project, it is also more than that. It's not the fruit of one personality or one person. It's about building a network, building a set of conversations between people coming from, of course, the field of architecture, but also the field of climate science and sort of cultural dimensions and beyond. So I'm really, really happy to introduce a number of architects who are participating in this pavilion, this project today, and also members of the from our partner organizations. So I think I should just start by pointing out a few people who are with us who really made this possible and who might be able to share some of their thoughts on the exhibition, on their contributions. First, over here, Hugh Broughton architect. Over here, Luca Rendino, also HB architect. And they are the authors, as it were, of the most recent built base in Antarctica, Halley 6. So we're very happy to have real Antarctic architects here with us today. I'm looking around. I see Matteo Bertele from the University of Ca' Foscari. Ca' Foscari has been a great partner to us. They're just across the water. The Center for the Study of Russian Art has been supporting Russian art and architecture and discourse in Venice for a while now, and they're really probably a unique platform, I think, in Italy for bringing together Russian and European minds, let's say. Over here, we have Daria Parkhomenko. Daria Parkhomenko. She's the director of Laboratorio, which is the only space for art and science interactions in Moscow. And Daria's work has involved polar exploration, bringing artists who've been to Antarctica, to the Arctic, to think about the importance or the changing attitudes towards ice, perhaps in culture and beyond. Next to her, Stuart Veech of Veech Media Architecture, and his better half, Masha Veech, architect based in Vienna. And who am I missing? Alexey Kozyr, author of this project here, the Orangery for Antarctica. And I missed anyone from this list? And of course, no, last but not least, Carlo Barbante, also from the Ca' Foscari, professor of chemical analysis and highly involved in Antarctic research. So I thought one way to start might be to sort of pass this over just really briefly to Matteo, whose research focuses very much on representations of pavilions in the Biennale in Venice in history, pavilions for states without governments perhaps, and perhaps just to ask you, how do you think this project fits into that kind of feature of the Biennale's history?
Yeah, thank you, Nadim. Well, I think this pavilion is kind of a challenge because the Venice Biennale was born as a kind of very battleground for national competition, so kind of world trade fairs, for example. So the pavilions are still there, so it's telling us that it's very rooted in this national identity characters, even if in the last years we had a lot of transnational experiments. Just to mention some of them, so Sasha's presence at the Venice Biennale in the last 7 years. So I suppose that he's the only one artist who exhibited in 2 different national pavilions. First in the Russian pavilion in 2007, then in the Ukrainian pavilion in 2011, I suppose, like the last architecture biennale. If we see it now from nowadays back, and it's very relevant, I mean Russia, Ukraine, for example. Sasha also had many different projects.
Maybe last time together, Russia, Ukraine.
Or many other projects like like a Subtiziano project, the submarine floating just in front of the camera. So a kind of extraterritoriality. It's like outside, yeah, the ground, it's just floating. And also 1 year ago with the Lost in Translation exhibition, curated by Antonio Geusa, organized by the Moscow Museum of Modern Art, Sasha was also like kind of outside, so not really inside the exhibition walls, but also floating. There was a water site-specific installation. Last but not least, some years ago we also presented with you also Nadim, the first biennial of Antarctica. It was a kind of presentation of the biennial which will take place in the future, we hope and we think. And this is a kind of prosecution now, opening the pavilion, the Antarctica Pavilion. So we'll try to give some also, I'll try to give some historical background, going back to the history of the biennial to see how many exceptions to national participations there were. There were many. If we see also this biennial, for example, the Golden Lion was awarded to Korea, which is actually like, it's representing not just South Korea, so one nation, but actually two Koreas. It's called the Korean Peninsula. So this kind of transnational character is growing in the last biennials. So I hope that in the next 5 years it will involve also this pavilion. So for the future history of the biennial, important contribution.
Thank you. I think that's one of the key sort of impetuses behind this project is, Venice being so overdetermined, on the face of it, by national representations. Antarctica being the only continent in the world where sovereign claims are suspended. And so how do you represent a space where the normal rules don't necessarily apply? And what productive potential lies in thinking about cultural enterprise, in a field where, we don't claim to own the space we're in. That was really something that we thought had a lot of potential for architects to consider. And something that we thought would be quite important, to bring to Venice. I think it's probably enough of me. I think I'd like to just put Daria on the spot, because Daria's work very much relates to how science and art interact, and how artists and kind of cultural practitioners can leave the gallery, let's say, to pursue research outside of the normal spaces of culture. So, Daria, what do you think about the potential of Antarctica, for example, as a cultural space?
Maybe you want to start. It's great. Should I come here? Yeah. If we say that, just to continue on the previous speaker idea, that Antarctic doesn't belong to any country, but it belongs to scientists and artists. So there's only two natures of these two people who live there. And of course, to unite them, it's more than natural. And what I do in the things that you already introduced, what we do in Moscow, it's a very special place, I think, that where we try to enforce the dialogue and to make the bridges, which is, I think many people hear about these practices, but it's not so easy to make these practices real, to work, to make these bridges really strong, not to fall down in any river or sea, like channel, if we make these bridges. And what we do, we invite a lot of scientists who work in Antarctic. For example, glaciologists, and one of our last exhibitions were dedicated to ice, and where we explore ice. And glaciologists gave artists a lot of rare, very rare material where people actually, they never reach to this information. For example, that ice is something which has a lot of memory about the past, even thousand years. And it's also give us material about many years in advance. And with this material, artists work. And I think it's not only for artists, also architects, musicians, playwrights. The time where we live now, it needs to bring us to new ideas. And only when people work together and exchange, and then it's, I would say the question is how to make this exchange real. And on this we work. On this we work and we make new methods. And one of the methods we do, anthropologists and sociologists help us a lot. That's the method we build a meta-language. I mean, it's something that helps us to communicate and to understand each other and to trust each other. And this meta-language, I mean, it's something, it sounds a little bit utopian now, but it's something, it's some kind of communication when artists can understand any scientist. We know that science is very focused now. But it's somehow that people can really be professionals in many fields. And on this we work. I mean, I have a lot of examples, but I'm afraid to take too much of time.
I think it's a nice segue, I think, perhaps to Hugh and Luca, because you are architects who have built in Antarctica. You know, the parameters of building there have, you know, there's so many practical, logistical considerations. There's so much sort of institutional sort of interest in what the result should be. Did you find it strange when you were invited to participate in this much more speculative kind of interdisciplinary proposition?
Probably at first, but you know, the thing that always fascinated me about working in Antarctica was that, as you say, there are all these very practical parameters that you have to face up to, but it doesn't negate the consideration of their more psychological, social and cultural aspects of living in the Antarctic. And it's always intrigued me that the principles that one might apply architecturally to any project apply just as strongly in the Antarctic. One can't be overawed by the environmental issues, by the cold, the wind, the snow, because those principles of people living in isolation, how people respond to darkness, how people respond to light. In fact, not only are they important, but they're even more important in such an isolated environment. And so also is kind of their ability to culturally express themselves, even though they might be living in a sort of icy white wasteland. So, you know, the ability, for example, of different people from different backgrounds to still state their origins and still have a sense of who they are remains just as important, probably more important in that kind of situation of isolation. So yeah, I think having first of all thinking, oh, how does our work, which is very practical, it's the reality of building in the Antarctic, it's actually real people living in the building that we have designed. Right now, in fact, those people are living in the Antarctic and it's 24 hours darkness there at the moment. It's probably about minus 45 degrees Celsius there today. But nonetheless, the issues which this exhibition confronts are issues that they, more than anybody else, would recognise. And so I then realised the significance of our involvement, and I think it's fantastic.
I was really interested when I spoke to Luca earlier in the piece about, you know, how did you come to research what might go into a future Antarctic base? I mean, was there a book about the architectural history of Antarctica? And I discovered from you that there isn't one book, so it's potentially difficult to learn everything you need to know about what's been built there and going forward. So how did you approach it?
Do you know what? That part wasn't so difficult because you know, quite often we do a talk about our project and we do a section on the history of architecture in the Antarctic, and it really does only comprise about 4 or 5 slides, because the earliest buildings, the buildings that people like Scott and Amundsen lived in, they lived in timber huts. The next generation, people lived underground, and you got some fantastic building, for example, by Buckminster Fuller at the South Pole. Then the next generation, they live above ground, and then before you know it, you're at today. And really, probably, the history of Antarctic architecture probably comprises no more than about 40 buildings, most of which are still timber huts. But the research into what works, how people live, is very involved. But one of the most brilliant things that we discovered about working with people in the Antarctic community is the extent of collaboration. You know, people will share knowledge between nations in a way that they might not do elsewhere in the world. So you would, for example, there have been very strong levels of collaboration, for example, between the United Kingdom and Argentina at times when politically those two countries have not necessarily had the best of relations. But in the Antarctic they've worked incredibly closely. And there are countless examples of that kind of relationship. And when we were designing our building, we had it reviewed by Germany, by the US, and we changed significantly our design following reviews with the French and the Italians from their experience building at Concordia. So one of the best places for learning is within the international community, and one of the best demonstrations that Antarctica is a place without political boundaries is when people start building. You realise the level of exchange which takes place, and that's kind of that for me, I think, was one of the great pleasures about designing, was learning from other people's experience and the generosity with which people addressed our own problems that we were facing up to.
Talking about the sort of generational progress, if you want to use that loaded term, of Antarctic architecture, we're talking about sort of underground to the surface of the ground. And then in the project by VMA, Stuart Veech, Matteo Bertele, over there, we find a proposition for stations that are above ground, and also in Alex Rader's work over there, out of building architecture, this sort of move towards the sky, so to speak. So I was hoping that Masha or Stuart, you might be able to say a few words about why your proposition for a floating research station network is a practical one.
I don't think we wanted to make a necessarily purely practical solution. That was not our goal of our proposal. It was more poetic, but also this kind of common approach, common ground approach. Yeah, which we saw it also as a perfect place to learn, about ourselves and to collaborate. That's why this ring, the representation of the collaboration, global collaboration of all nations, and the main statement of our project. It should be not built urbanism, let's say, in the Antarctic, but it should be more non-territorial, fluid, and not nationally possessed stations, but Stuart, maybe you can also add on.
Well, we live a transnational partnership for about 20 years, Masha and I, Russian-American, so we saw with Antarctica a great opportunity to find a neutral territory to talk about architecture in general, but also talk about things, for architects' master planning, and also about energy. And I think one of our most important topics was energy. How do you look at civilizations in the future about the talk of energy? Fossil fuels is at some point going to go out. So we looked at the harsh conditions there, and you kind of mentioned about the progression of different type of architectural dwellings and buildings going on. So we kind of tied up two things together. One is energy, and one is also mobility, in the sense that airships and moving around research stations and having no borders, because there is no place right now where you have no master plan and no borders. So I think this was a challenge. It was a great topic to look at between architecture, art, technology, and science to make some propositions and have freedom without having restrictions. And it was a very challenging and I think very rewarding experience for everybody involved in the whole project.
I just want to bring in Professor Carlo Barbante from Carfoscary, because you're a scientist working with chemical analysis and sort of geoclimatic sort of field of research, and you've of course been to Antarctica multiple times. I was wondering, what is your perspective on, let's say, cultural activity in Antarctica and the relationship with the science community. Does the science community think it's important for there to be cultural activity there, artists in residence, architects and the rest?
Yeah, as an end user, I would say, of architectures like this, I mean, we are certainly very positive to see all the culture behind that is behind it. Until today, we are still living in shelters, you know, and very easy things and cubes of boots or aluminium or iron, and living in a friendly environment is certainly something which is changing your life. When we are in the field, we have not that much time to look around, because we are committed to work every hour of the day. You know that most of the time is we work in the summertime, and which is 24-hour light, and so we are pushed to work as much as we can. But definitely to have the contact in between science and art and architecture is definitely good. To live in a good environment, with a good spirit, with a good collaboration, international collaboration, which is certainly very important, is something that makes change your life. And we have been very happy to see new reality coming up. First, the new Ali station, which is certainly a must on that, and then the Yambogo station, which is nearby the Italian station, and most probably in the near future also the Chinese station, which will be built on the other side of the bay where we are. Definitely those things in a no man's land is definitely very important. And beside that, I'm also very happy to see an installation like this. You know, Antarctica is losing ice every year, especially in the West Antarctic. We are losing ice, but we are gaining 400 square meters here, which is extremely important to have a visibility of a continent which is really unique and is a really great laboratory from a scientific point of view, but it should be also from a cultural point of view.
I think is Alexey Kozyr still here? I wanted to bring in in any case, just to introduce one more of the architect's works briefly, the Antarctic poppy orangery, Arctic poppy orangery in Antarctica. And this is, you know, I think an example of where the sort of speculative approach of the exhibition meets, again, a kind of set of practical sort of propositions for how that might be realized. And sometimes the technology of working in these spaces has its own poetry as well. So we find in Alexey Kozyr's work these Arctic poppies whose petals rotate to face the sun individually, mapping somehow the movement of the solar panels that are also rotating at the same time. So there's a kind of choreography of working in Antarctica. But I think, Alexey, I just mentioned your work, I just spoke all about it. Would you like to say a few words?
It's possible in Russian or
Maybe Russian, but very short.
very short. Ну, это вот наша попытка с нашей командой, с Сашей, с Надимом, с моими.
Сильвия, профессор Борини переведет. Тебе можешь по-русски говорить?
Могу по-русски.
Хорошо. Ну, я по-итальянски перевожу, не по-английски.
Ну и сначала про дизайн экспозиции, непосредственно которым я занимался, хотел бы сказать. Вот. Что основная идея у нас была такая нацеленность на практичность.
Саша, я на английском.
Как будем? По-итальянски или по-английски? Если по-английски, может быть...
Many people speak English.
По-английски.
Сначала несколько слов про экспозицию. Да, про экспозицию, поскольку я являюсь автором экспозиции.
I'm the author of the exposition, and I would like to comment a little bit about it.
Да, основная идея была сделать экспозицию очень практичную и очень мобильную, чтобы она могла интегрироваться в любое пространство, там, в в интерьерные, экстерьерные и в любые климатические условия, поскольку мы имеем дело с экстремально низкими температурами и работаем с Антарктикой.
The main idea was to make the exposition very simple, mobile, because we work with the low temperatures, and even with these temperatures it should survive.
И от этого как бы произошло такое слияние, да, то есть у нас получился с одной стороны образ музыкальный, потому что в экспозиции использованы кофры для музыкальных инструментов и ширмы, то есть кофры, это немецкое слово, кофры, да. А с другой стороны получилась такая мобильная экспозиция, которая может как бы передвигаться, существовать в разных климатических и там, жизненных ситуациях, хоть на улице, хоть внутри помещения, где угодно. Кофры, да, кофры они называются.
Suitcases. Okay,
кофры.
So we use these suitcases, coffers, again to show you and to exaggerate this kind of transformation and mobility.
We use this musical
suitcases.
Это ширмы, скрин, экран.
Yes, and these kind of screens that they are very mobile, so we can bring them and change the space and to bring them everywhere.
Да. Вот, это про экспозицию. Теперь непосредственно про объект.
That was about exposition, and now about my work.
Да. Это первая в мире антарктическая оранжерея мак полярных.
That's the first Antarctic orangery for flower that you can see here, the red flower called mак. Poppy. Antarctic poppy.
Да, когда я начал думать над этим проектом, я посмотрел много литературы и был поражен, когда увидел, в принципе, там ничего не растет в Антарктиде, только какие-то редкие мхи и лишайники.
Before doing this project, I did a research and saw read a lot of literature and books about the plants in Antarctic, and so there are very few of them. And
not this Arctic poppy.
So, and the Arctic poppy is one of the very rare that can survive in this, in these low temperatures.
Да, я был поражен жизнелюбием этого цветка, потому что он, с одной стороны, очень хрупкий, маленький, он 15 сантиметров высотой, и при этом он живет практически при минусовых температурах. И для меня это стало, с одной стороны, очень сильным художественным образом, поскольку это очень красиво, лед и цветы, да? И с другой стороны, это и научная цель, да, по изучению, как можно выжить в таких условиях.
So, and I was really surprised and that about the love to live and to survive, how this plant wants to live and to survive, and that for me was very inspiring. The plant is, the flower is only 50 centimeters high, and it's very fragile, but still it can survive in these very severe temperatures. And for me it was like a merge of art and science to build the orangery for this flower.
How life can live, how a flower can live in the situation where it's not possible to live. That's all I think.
Thank you, thank you. So I think that ends the talk aspect, and I think it's just about time for me to present Alexander Ponomarov to announce the opening of our vernissage. Please, Sasha, say a few words and welcome everyone, and then...
Дорогие друзья, как вы понимаете, Мы нуждаемся в официальном открытии. Кто переведет на английский или итальянский язык? Сильвия. На английский, да, давай, на итальянский, на английский. Значит, я хочу сказать, что идея этого павильона возникла давно.
Per cominciare, per fare un'inaugurazione ufficiale del padiglione bisogna dire che l'idea di questa padiglione è cominciata tanto tempo fa.
А еще раньше возникла идея биеннале в Антарктиде,
E ancora prima è cominciata l'idea di fare la biennale in Antartide,
которая состоится через некоторое время, и мы с архитекторами и художниками будем строить инсталляции во льдах.
e che ci sarà tra un po' di tempo e con architetti e artisti costruiremo delle installazioni proprio sopra il ghiaccio.
Наша команда работает над этой идеей уже достаточное время.
La nostra squadra lavora a questa idea da tanto tempo.
Это помещение нам досталось благодаря дружбе с семьей Марчелло, как вы знаете.
Questo spazio ce l'abbiamo grazie all'amicizia con la famiglia del conte Marcello,
Большого друга нашего великого поэта Бродского.
un grande amico del nostro grande poeta Brodsky.
Мы хотели бы очень поблагодарить IVC Charity Foundation, Майя, вот представитель его, который позволяет нам использовать это помещение в Венеции.
Vogliamo ringraziare la fondazione che ci ha permesso di usare questo spazio a Venezia.
Мы очень бы хотели поблагодарить Исмаила Ахметова, где он.
Vogliamo anche ringraziare Ismail Ahmetov che vorremmo che venisse qui.
Без которого не состоялась бы эта выставка.
Senza il quale non ci sarebbe stata questa mostra.
Этот человек поддерживает давно русскую архитектуру, и не только русскую.
È una persona che dà molto sostegno all'architettura russa e non solo quella russa.
И многие архитекторы его знают, любят и уважают.
E molti architetti lo conoscono, lo stimano, gli vogliono bene.
И мы его уважаем, любим и знаем.
E anche noi gli vogliamo bene, lo apprezziamo e lo stimiamo.
Я хочу поблагодарить в первую очередь всех авторов.
E naturalmente voglio ringraziare per prima cosa tutti gli autori.
Здесь замечательные, знаменитые архитекторы, все звезды.
Qui ci sono tutti architetti molto famosi, sono tutti delle star,
Абсолютно разные,
diversi tra di loro,
но все чудесные. Я
tutti
думаю,
importanti e fantastici.
эта команда уже сможет работать в Антарктиде.
E questa è la squadra che potrebbe già lavorare in Antartide.
Я хочу поблагодарить университет Ка. Фоскаре и Центр русской культуры, с которым мы сотрудничаем уже много лет.
Vorrei ringraziare l'Università Ca' Foscari e il Centro
Непосредственно
di
Сильвию.
Cultura Russa con cui lavoro già da tanti anni e anche Silvia che sono io.
Когда я приплыл сюда на подводной лодке, единственное, кто встретил меня с радостными объятиями, была Сильвия и университет.
E sono stata quella che insieme all'università l'ha incontrata a braccia aperte quando ho portato per la prima volta il sottomarino in Canal Grande.
Я хочу поблагодарить нашу команду.
Voglio ringraziare la nostra squadra
Мы издали такую замечательную книжку.
anche per aver fatto questo fantastico catalogo.
Автор этой книжки Алена Иванова, ее производная
E l'autrice di questo libro è Aliona Ivanova, la voglio ringraziare.
Она чудесный художник, дизайнер,
È una bravissima
умница и
artista,
красавица.
una bravissima designer, una donna intelligente e bellissima.
Я думаю, что эта книжка уже станет фактом культуры.
E questo libro è già un fatto della cultura.
Я хочу поблагодарить Катерину Шольц, которая взяла на себя огромную деятельность по сбору этих работ
Che ha fatto un lavoro
в разных концах Европы.
e di mettere d'accordo tutti questi lavori nei vari punti dell'Europa.
Я хочу поблагодарить всю команду, которая с нами работала.
E di nuovo tutta la squadra che ha lavorato.
И еще раз поклониться архитекторам. Думаю, что мы не в последний раз встречаемся.
E inchinandomi agli architetti spero che non sia l'ultima volta e penso che ci incontriamo.
И предлагаю всем выпивать.
E adesso vi invito a bere.
И под конец
E alla fine,
я хочу сделать одну вещь.
alla fine voglio fare una cosa.
Сейчас, подождите. Лёг, держи. Не бойся. Карманы узкие. Деньги? Да. Куда я дел? Да, очень обратите. Волнуюсь. Я хочу подарить
Voglio regalare
моим друзьям
ai miei amici, voglio regalare ai miei amici.
вдвоем. Я хочу подарить вот по такому сувенирчику.
Un piccolo souvenir,
Очень дорогому.
però molto prezioso.
Это кусочек Антарктиды.
È un pezzo di Antartide, pezzettino di Antartide.
Профессор Брамант меня простит, это нельзя делать.
Il professor Barbante si scusa perché sa che non si può fare.
I don't tell it.
Не рассказывай. Это важный сувенир. Мои друзья обычно кольца делают из этого. Приносит счастье.
Di solito i miei amici ne hanno fatto degli anelli che portano fortuna.
Надимчик, я тебе уже, по-моему, давал. Ну, я хочу особо сказать несколько слов о Надиме Саммане, нашем кураторе.
Vorrei dire qualcosa sul nostro curatore, Nadim,
Его супруге Ане,
e sua moglie Ania,
благодаря которым, по сути дела, эта выставка и состоялась.
perché grazie a loro questa mostra si è potuta fare.
Надим доктор искусствознания,
Nadim ha il dottorato in storia dell'arte,
специалист по русскому искусству.
è uno specialista di arte russa,
Сейчас работает в фонде Тhyssen-Bornemisza в Вене.
lavora a Vienna nella fondazione Bornemisza-Thyssen,
Философ.
è un filosofo
Если вы... И уже моряк чуть-чуть.
e anche un pochino già marinaio.
И я думаю, что у нас вместе большое будущее.
E insieme avremo un grande futuro,
Особенно под контролем Ани.
soprattutto sotto il controllo di
Анна.
Anna.
Кому я еще не дал камешек?
Мне.
Тебе не дал? Спасибо большое, выпивайте.
E